My nose, excuse me, to the grindstone and just working, So first of all, I just want to say that John Easter is doing a great job. His theme of sons and daughters is resonating with the constituency, and he's been traveling all over the United States. He was in so many district councils last year. I know he's in a whole bunch this year again. And so it's just, it's good. Greg served for 12 years. Obviously, I served most of the years that Greg was in office, both in mobilization and as RD. So, Greg and Sandy Mundus are dear friends of Liz and I. We love them so much and still have regular contact with them. But, it's good to get refreshing. He had been in for 12 years, and John has brought a fresh vision and a fresh impetus and, this message of sons and daughters and trying to frame missions in our U.S. constituency as they're not just sending anybody, they're sending their own sons and daughters out into the field. And that's definitely resonated with a lot of people. And so that's been super positive. John has definitely a propensity to raise money too. So he's well connected with the business world and has hired a director of development, Tim Smith. So, obviously Randy Hurst did that for years, but Randy, he's up in his 70s as well. So there's a moment in a time where, you've got to be, looking for new people. So Tim Smith, a guy who lives in Kansas City, he's out of the Kansas City area, travels down to Springfield 3 days a week, and has been working hard in this area of development and raising money for AGWM. Sorry. That's point number one. Just wanted to give you an update on John. Number two, one of the things that's happening, I would say, across all AGWM wide levels is that we're really trying to upgrade our training on all levels. So this is both incoming training, training for FC, AD, RD. This actually stems from last year's investigations into the allegations of a spiritual abuse on our teams. And so one of the things that we're trying to do as a mission is, and I think some of that, some of those investigations, some of those things that came out were because we had team leaders and people in leadership that weren't really yet qualified or mature enough to be leading. So we're trying to pull back a little bit from some of those things and make sure that as we put people in leadership, they're well trained. So in the spring, you're going to see something come out called AGWM Lead. So AGWM Lead will be 4 leadership levels. Inside of each level, there's going to be, I think, 4 modules. And inside of each module is like 16 lessons. So AGWM Lead will be something like a 300-hour course on leadership. And basically what we're saying too is that if you want to lead in AGWM, you got to graduate from AGWM Lead, all right? And so, we'll be rolling it out and we'll be giving opportunities. It'll be really for second-term career missionaries to start in that. And part of the reason why we're not trying to hold back MAs or first-term people, but yet we felt like with first-term people, you've got the transition into a new country, the learning of a language, and to add AGWM Lead on top of that. The RDs all pushed back on that and said they'll spend all their time doing those things and never get any souls won for Jesus. Amen? Yeah. Hallelujah. So, one of the things that concerns me about all the leadership training, and I've kind of voiced my opinion at the table, is, we'll spend so much time in seminars and training that we're never going to plant any churches or get the work done that we need to do. So we have to balance the whole thing out. But it is something that we really need. There's no handbook on being RD, AD, or FC. When Brian became AD, he'll tell you, he's like, look at me, and I'm like, hey, look, I wasn't an AD either. I went from mobilization to RD, and even the RD job, the first thing I did after I knew I was, RD elect, so I had a couple months to figure the whole transition out. And so I made a 2-hour appointment with every existing RD. And I sat down and like, what do you want to talk about? They're like, why did you make this 2-hour appointment? I said, well, to start with, what does an RD do? Well, I interviewed 5 people and I got 5 different answers, So there's really like no manual on this thing. And of course, I kind of drew some lines as I interviewed these guys and figured out, okay, this is kind of what I need to do. But what we're trying to do is upgrade our training and make sure that, those things are available. Even me, I think they said because I'm an RD, I can start at level 3. But actually, I do want to go through all 4 of these AGWM lead levels. I'm appreciative of Brian because Brian and Renee have put a big emphasis on training. Obviously, the Mad Joy retreats. I believe they're meeting regularly with their FCs. They've brought me in on those calls. And so there is an ongoing desire to train and build up, leaders and team leaders. So I just wanted to give you kind of an update and a picture into AGWM lead and where that's going. Third bullet point I have here. I want to talk about AP Reach teams just briefly. I think we were ahead of the game. So when some of these allegations of spiritual abuse came out at the General Council in 2023, I think some of it was related to what was going on teams. A year before that, we were, already working on what we were going to do within our team structure so that we can not have those kinds of things happen. We came up with five things that team members need to do, 5 cultures that we wanted on teams, and then 5 characteristics of a team leader. And we're kind of working off of that basis so that we have healthy teams in Asia Pacific. And just so that really there were none of those allegations were in Asia Pacific. So I'm not aware of any. I asked over and over again when the whole investigation was going on. I'm like, and by the way, I wasn't like on a witch hunt either. I wasn't like, okay, where is the team leader who's abusing our people? I'm gonna, crush down on him. I just said, look, can you just even give me I don't need to know where and who. Just tell me, give me some bullet points of what's going on so we can address it. Yeah, AP was clean. So, with that in mind, it doesn't mean that we can't be wary of how we do teams in the future. One of the important things that came out of the investigation into all this stuff is there has to be healthy feedback loops. And healthy feedback loops are where if you're serving on a team or you're serving in anywhere in Asia Pacific, but say for instance you're serving on a team and all of a sudden your team leader is doing things that you don't like, you have to have a place to go. Like your FC, your AD, and even to me, it's okay. Now, I mean, Brian and Renee know that, if somebody talks to me, I'm not going to immediately throw the area director under the bus. I'm going to check and talk, and we're going to try to communicate a little bit better. But even if you don't feel like you're getting what you feel like you should have, or you don't feel good about my decision making, you write to agwmfeedback@ag.org, the address that John gave in the video that he sent out. It was kind of funny, when you're in my job, you deal with a lot of problems all the time, right? So I'm actually write to them all the time, they can handle all the problems, I don't want any problems at all, just write to AGWM feedback. And of course that was a joke. But the feedback loops are there, and it's okay to talk about them and write or to express, how you're feeling in a certain situation. It doesn't always mean, I think sometimes, it was how do we even define spiritual abuse? I had a whole teaching on it I did last year in New Zealand, if you guys who were there from the leadership team remember. But kind of some people define spiritual abuse as, well, if I don't get everything I want, I'm being abused spiritually. And it's well, that's just not the way a team works or an organization can work. So, there is something in that too that we have to be a little bit, cautious of as we go forward, that it's not just well, we're just going to let you do whatever you want because we don't want to be accused of spiritual abuse. So, but we're working on all those things, And I really believe our AP Reach teams are set up well, where there's enough freedom within the team, and yet we've got the basics of an outline of how we want those teams to look like. So we talked about these 5 cultures. One of the beauties of, I think, AGWM, what I felt like when I was, serving on the field for sure, was that there was a certain level of freedom I had in my day-to-day activities where, if I was being led by the Spirit, or, I felt like God was prompting me to plant a church somewhere. Obviously, I was checking with, people around me in order to see if that was the right thing or not. But there wasn't a freedom in that we could, have those kinds of activities. So I just feel like the Reach teams are set in the right place. The 4th point I have is, at a glance, I want to talk about our numbers now. At a glance, our numbers are very good. As a region, we are growing steadily to where, with the addition of China, we are now the 2nd largest region in AGWM with 505 personnel. China only added 90 people. So we were at 415 when it was added, and this is from 335 when I was RD. When I started as RD, the numbers we had were 335 personnel. We grew to 415. And really, our steady positive growth throughout the last 7 years has been good. Other regions, because we all kind of watch and talk and see, another region grew very fast, but they've actually kind of shrunk back because they sent so many people out, but a lot of them didn't stay. So we're not the largest region, but our growth has been steady and positive, and we haven't had a year where we reversed. I don't know the numbers yet for this year. We'll have to see. I usually have Elise check it all at the end of the year. And numbers aren't everything, but it is in some ways, since one of my jobs is to recruit and try to add people to our field, it's just a matrix for me to know, are we doing things right? And part of the growth of the region is we're trying to close the back door. So this is the whole, as we built up AP Reach teams and talked about the cultures, and we want to improve the leadership of our team leaders. Part of that is because we're trying to get people to stay. And a lot of times the staying depends a lot on the team leaders. Not always, by the way, but it does depend somewhat, as I've done exit interviews on team leaders. We've got SALTs coming up this year. It's interesting to me. I have this weird impression. So we did World Mission Summits for all these years, right? We did 4 World Mission Summits. And I was the opening night speaker for the very first World Mission Summit in Louisville, Kentucky in 2005. I was also the last speaker at Houston in 2016. And when I got off the stage, and that day I said to Scott Martin, I said, Scott, I said, if this is the last summit, I'll have been in the first and the last one. And he goes, oh, that's not going to happen. We're doing another one. Of course, COVID derailed the one we were going to do. And then problems, issues, and other issues that happened in Chi Alpha derailed the second one. I don't know for sure, but I'm not sure we'll ever have another World Mission Summit. But as a result of that, we've now kind of convinced or talked to Chi Alpha leadership that every couple of years or so, they're going to make their SALTs missions emphasized. And so this year, they're going to do SALTs, but it's going to have a heavy missions emphasis and mission speakers and et cetera and so on. So that's going to happen in January. We've got a big team we put together. We've got people going to these different SALTs, and we're just expecting God to speak to people in Chi Alpha. Now, that being said, are there any Chi Alphans in the room here?
What is SALT?
I don't even know what it stands for. I just know that Chi Alpha does these things called SALTs, which are big retreats.
Is it like SALT 19 or something like that?
It's a youth
It's like a youth convention at the section or district level, but for college campuses and regional states around, they meet once every 2 or 3 years.
There's no, they meet every year. The SALTs happen every year, and they're regional in nature. The problem with the World Mission Summit was that they canceled all the SALTs and made them all come together in one place. That was what they didn't like, really. The regional people didn't like that so much. So a SALT is a regional gathering of universities and colleges. The big ones this year will be South Central, is going to be probably the biggest, and then the one up in Minnesota, which is kind of like Great Lakes area. Those are the two biggies. They're going to have like about 2,000 and 1,500 respectively, and then the others are kind of small, like 500, 700. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 6 SALTs that are going to go on, and we're going to have people in presence at all of them. I'll be honest with you, we don't have like a lot of Chi Alpha people coming to AP. I mean, and PO, any Chi Alphans here or not? No, so we're kind of at 0 on Chi Alpha. So we're putting the effort forward. We've talked through what our responses are going to be and how we're going to follow up on that. And we're hoping and praying that we'll see some folks come through, but that's not where we're putting our bank right now. I'm super appreciative of Brian and Renee, who introduced us to Missions and Me, and they've allowed us to run that now as a regional event, not just an area event, and I'm very, very thankful for their willingness to do that, because even last year, we did it in June, we had 2 couples in this candidate class that came from Missions and Me in June, and I think in March, there's going to be another, like 4, I think, coming through that were in Missions and Me. And we already have 3 registered for the one coming up at the end of May. And the Missions and Me, I know all of you have been there, Brian and Renee obviously are the architects of this thing, but I think it focuses a little more on people coming out of the local church, not just the students that are 22 years old that are coming out that are looking for a gap year or figuring out what they want to do, but they're really more focused on people who are like, hey, I've been in the local church, I'm serving well, and we find that this is like a gold mine for us. So, man, if we get 8 people, which is I think what our number is going to be out of that, Missions and Me, it's a well, I mean, we go to General Council and spend so much money, which I don't even want to talk about, and we don't get 8 people. No, you just don't. So, this is a great, great event, and we're looking forward to it. It's going to be at the end of May in New Jersey. So but it's funny, the 3 people that registered so far are coming from the Midwest, so we'll see what happens. We'll pray for them, right? We'll pray for them, right? But they need a language guide and a culture guide when they get to New Jersey, right? But I think we're also going to tap into the Northeast quadrant. Like, I'm in pretty close relationship with the district missions directors there, and I'm going to be, early in the year, I'm going to be on a call with them and say, hey, who do you have in your district that's interested in missions, specifically in Asia Pacific? And why don't you have them come to this event? And it's low cost, and I think the impact is just tremendous. And we've tweaked it a little bit because we've got, all the different areas represented there, but I think overall, I think it was a big success last time, and I'm just praying that'll be another big success this time. So, very thankful for the growth. When I was first RD, Greg Mundis said, what are your growth goals? And I was like, well, 500 by 2024, which is kind of coming up. Well, it was 2023 maybe. I can't remember. It was 2023 or 2024. But we weren't gonna make that. COVID really did kind of slow us down. We were moving along kind of hitting pace for that. But we really grew. I mean, again, comparatively speaking, I wouldn't say AGWM is in decline, but it has been flat numbers-wise for the 12 years that I've been on the executive committee. So the idea that we went from 335 to 415, and the total number of missionaries in AGWM did not grow. So we're like a growing region, and other regions are declining. And one of the things we find in AGWM right now is people are retiring. And it's trying to see those people replaced by new missionaries is just a thing that we're all trying to work on and are working hard at. Let's see. Number 5. Financially, we had financially in 2023, Asia Pacific had the biggest financial year we've ever had. We had Stone Table came alongside of us and gave us, I think, close to $1.7 million. I spoke at the Peninsular Florida District Council, and they added in another $500,000 or $600,000 just for church planting in the Buddhist world. And then our regular Asia Pacific Board of Regents also came in with about $300,000, which is kind of on average what we've been doing. So it was more than $2 million. Now, I realize that for all of you, this doesn't equivalent into support into your accounts for your day-to-day operations. But I do want to let you know on the project side of things, we had a good year in 2023. We're not seeing that this year, but this year's been more about spending the $2 million that we got in 2023. And what I mean by spending is these were like kind of projects that we're addressing, and we're trying to deploy that money and get it into play. And it's exciting to see. We've got a Western outpost in Mongolia that we established there within the last few years. And this is like another growth story. Imagine I became RD 2017, October 17, and we had one missionary family there, and I went and visited them in 2018. But by 2019, that missionary had died, and we had nobody left in Mongolia. In 2019, we didn't have one family. Today, we have 3 families, a single career, a couple of MAs, and we have more MKs than adult missionaries on that field. And we established an outpost in Govi Altai, which is this western province of Mongolia, where the Assembly of God didn't exist, and where the church didn't exist, and where we had never had any missionaries. And I'm getting pictures now just today. This is with the help of Stone Table, where we're building a ministry center that's going to be huge. That's enormous. I can't even tell you just how big this thing is, but that's like kind of the help of Stone Table was for some projects like that, and that was really, really helpful. But it's exciting to see that growth as well. So not only has PO grown, but Northern Pacific Rim has grown, and the other areas probably, since they already had a lot of people, they've grown some, but the 2 areas with the most dynamic growth have been Pacific Oceania and Northern Pacific Rim. BGMC, this is point number 6. I have to be careful what I say publicly, so that's what I just wrote in my notes here. But for 1.5 years now, my office has received no BGMC discretionary funds. So it used to be that BGMC would give me money, and then when you gave me requests, I would just be able to answer those requests and get the money to you, especially if it was an urgent need. And it was for kids, projects, and then sometimes urgent needs. Like we had a Bible school one time, their water tower crashed to the ground, and it was nothing. They needed $7,900 to rebuild this thing, and they were in trouble. And I was like, okay, I have urgent funds I can use from BGMC to do that kind of stuff. We're not getting those anymore. We don't know when or if that will ever be restored to us. So BGMC is still funding some things, but you should give yourselves 1 to 2 years of lead time if you request. I hope at some point they'll resolve what's happening there. It's all under what they call now Next Gen Ministries. So even in the financial report we got in October, the total overall giving of BGMC to HEWM is significantly down. Just be reminded, and this is like lost on people, BGMC, Speed the Light are not ministries of HEWM. They are owned and operated by the General Council, and we consider them auxiliaries. So if they give to us or they don't give to us, it's really up to them. And so a lot of times with their discretionary or their funding, they're not just giving to HEWM, they're giving to domestic ministries and even some ministries that are other kinds of things that, like I said, I don't want to get into too much here. But I do want to let you know that I'm now in a place where on occasion, you know, like Mark would be like, hey, I'm doing these kids crusades, you know, and I need $3,000 or $4,000, and I'm like, send it to them next month. Because I had discretionary money, so I could like send things out quickly to people that were asking me for different things. I'm like out, and we're done. I mean, I still have a little bit of discretionary money left, but I guess I'm just holding it, hoping it's a seed that we'll still get some more discretionary funds. But at this point, it's been a year and a half since we've gotten any discretionary money from BGMC. My last point is that we have finished the book, Deposing Kingdoms. It is out. We want to read it as a region, the first 21 days of 2025, and then end with a prayer meeting. For some of Asia, it would be the morning of January 2022. For those of you out in the islands, it's probably going to be like midday on January 22nd. Because we can't like mail the book to you, it's available on digital formats, Kindle and other things. We're asking you to buy the book and reimburse yourself from your $00. We're going to put out a blanket, approval for you to be able to buy it. It's digital is what, Brian? $7.99, $9.99? Yeah, it's cheaper than the $14 for the paperback. But it's going to be like a $10 purchase. It'll also help us too. When you buy a bunch of books like that, it kind of just jumps up the thing. Just last night, the night before last, a superintendent in the States who I'd given the book to wrote me and said, I'll never read the book of Ephesians the same way again. My life was transformed by this book. Can you send me 7 copies for everybody on my executive team? So that's just one superintendent who just was like, this was absolutely fabulous. So Brian, who's our general editor, spent a lot of time on this book. I think that spiritually speaking, the devil tried to keep this book from going to print. Like we had so many different things go on with this book that it took us longer than we ever expected. Matter of fact, this January will be 3 years when we first talked about doing another book. I said to Brian, I said, I'm not doing another book again. I'm done. Like, I am out, you know. And so we're going to have dinner in the beginning of December. Brian said, well, maybe we could do some things different. We'll see. But it took a lot it takes a lot, by the way, on my team especially, and on Brian too, because he's really kind of helped us with a lot of the different books. The fiction I wrote, if you haven't read it yet, it's fabulous. I don't mean it because I wrote it, but it's just really done extremely well. Everybody who's read it, I've yet to meet somebody who likes fiction and actually reads, say to me, yeah, it wasn't worth my while. I just had so many people, and I get these I just was up in Kansas City and this lady got a copy of it and she read it and she's like, I want it for my book club, can you send me a whole box, So I just think we're gonna that book is really kind of moving the ball forward on spiritual warfare as well. So I encourage you to get The Last Nation. All right, well, those are my 7 points. I took half of my time talking, and now the other half is going to be spent answering all of your questions that I know you have so many of. And by the way, you can ask me anything you want about what's going on at HEWM, anything that I've talked about here, or maybe something, I don't know, Brian, that maybe you thought I would talk about and I didn't go over. But I just kind of wanted to give you news from the home office, so to speak, and then give you a chance to ask questions of me. Okay, Sam, you're first. Or are you just going to carry the mic around?
Yeah. No, I have a question.
Right.
So you said we were kind of ahead of things on the AP Reach teams with, and that was before John kind of took the helm.
Right.
Is there going to be any changes with that, or are we kind of just going forward with the same structure and same approach?
We're going forward with the same structure and the same approach, so we've not been asked to not do AP Reach teams. You know, and I don't know where John will eventually go with all of it. I mean, you realize we've got this movement within AGWM called Live Dead that is powerful and has a lot of people, but not everybody is part of that. So I don't see us turning the whole movement into Live Dead. I don't see that for sure. And yet I also don't see him discontinuing Live Dead. So at this point, you know, we've got Reach teams, and they're addressing a certain, I don't want to say problem, but, you know, way of doing ministry, and we're going to stick with those and keep going forward with that, and I have not heard that that would be discontinued at any point.
Great.
Okay, Nick, and then Patty.
I'm just wondering, as now that Northern Age is part of our with wow, special. All right. Small island, I don't know these. Sorry. No, but now that Northern Age is added, what are some prayer points? Because you know, it's kind of like we kind of like adopted them in, but you know, we've kind of been disconnected. We were two regions. Do you have like a few prayer points that we can add just to keep them in our prayers as part of our family now?
Well, you know, pray for these new, I call them family members, because, you know, this was abrupt for them. You know, when I went into this, I said to myself, you know, I'm not their RD. Like, they didn't choose me. So I started out, you know, I don't want to say in the deficit column, but for sure, I started out at 0. You know, like I didn't have anything in the bank with them. I think it's been good so far. I mean, we really made great efforts this summer to welcome them in because we integrated them into MR. I'll be having a retreat with them January 25 through 27, 28, like that last week of January, that last full week. They're all coming back to the U.S. So you have to realize that the constraints that are on our team members in China right now with the security issues and the facial recognition, we can't do an area retreat in Asia. And so we're bringing them all back to Dallas, Texas. They're going to use the North Texas District Camp, and we're going to meet with them there for a week. And I felt like it was a bit urgent that I made them face-to-face and that we talk. I think they've lost a lot of personnel. A lot of their BAMs were closed down. China just has these things where they wake up and overnight they just change the rules. So it's not like, you know, hey, the government doesn't come to you and say, hey, you know, in the next year or so, we're going to change how it's like the next day, they just decide, and then, you know, we're out. So personnel are down. I feel like they've taken so many hits, they're on like a life support. So just be praying that, especially in that meeting in January, we can like reinvigorate them, re-strategize. Let's not give in to this, is what I want to say to them, is let's stand up and you know, fight for this thing. It's worthy to be fought for. And you know, the main ministry in China is not so, you know, we all hear these reports, well, there's 100 million Christians in China, right? So, which is true, but they're all Han. So you guys in this room understand ethnicities. So, but there's a whole bunch of Chinese ethnicities that have 0 Christians, that have 0 churches. And so those really are kind of where our people are trying to engage and work. So just be praying that their spirits will be lifted up. And number 2, that this meeting that we have in January, that God will really just inspire them and build them back up again. It was exciting. We had 2 career units come through in October for Northern Asia, and that was the first time in a couple of years that they've had new missionaries. So that was pretty exciting for them, and we're excited about that too. So, Pat.
For us newbies, you guys use a lot of like initials and
Acronyms,
stuff.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and we have no idea what you mean when you say that. Is there a place anywhere online when you can go to get this? And that's not my question.
It's such a good idea. Like we should do like an a catalog of acronyms for
Sure,
AGWM.
because like you lose me like halfway through. We-
FC, AD, and RD.
Oh, I know those. I
Okay.
do know.
Can I use any other acronyms in here? BGMC?
Yeah,
BAM? Business
BAM I
Mission?
know because we went with.
Salts?
Yeah. I do have a question. We received an email from our BGMC, whatever BGMC means. We received one from Oklahoma, and I think she would love to give us funds. But we were told that Missionary Associates cannot receive funds from BGMC. And so she was gonna check with she said she was gonna check with the national office. I don't think she ever got a response. So is that yes or no? Do you know, are MAs allowed to receive funds?
So the way this is working now is you have to fill out a form requesting funds. And then it goes through Brian, it goes through me. I'm not aware of MAs not being allowed to get BGMC funds. Are you, Brian?
You know, we thought it was career, and if the MA needed funds, that it came through their career.
So through Diane, you would fill out a request form and write in there Oklahoma District could potential sponsor for this, because I think there's a place to put that in there. And then that form goes to Brian and then to me. And then here's the challenging part. This is why I said you need 1 or 2 years. The BGMC committee only meets like 2 times a year. So they'll then look at it and decide. And they're just not approving, like we just had a ministry go down just in the last day or 2 here that had been receiving, my help through BGMC for a long time. I can't say what the ministry is or where it was, but I mean, the missionary is like, what are we gonna do? Because we've, had funds to help with this for the last few years, and at this point, I don't know if I got an answer for them. But that would be the way it would work, would be go work through Diane, and then through Brian, and then through me. And Brian could be right in this. It could be that MAs aren't eligible for BGMC, but through your career missionary, you are.
I had a question about the BGMC also. I know maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, we had some projects in churches actually designated to us for those projects. Is that still gonna be a possibility, or?
I think as long as you have an approved project, it can come through there. They say they talk about this openly. I think you just have to be prepared that the percentages are quite high that are taken out of the offering. So, if the church gives $1,000, I think BGMC is at 29%. Just telling you what I know. It's gone above speed to light. So by the way, this is just the church has to, the church, I don't know if they know it or not, but, yeah. It's better if the churches just give to us, but that's, between the Lord and all of you. But, yes, if those designated offerings are coming in for your project, as long as you've got the code and the number and everything else like that, it'll go through.
Maybe confirm that those project numbers are.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Confirm that the project numbers are still active too, because I think after a year, those numbers kind of, so a lot of it is about communication and communicating regularly. Even Elise Tram, our beloved Elise Tram, is pretty frustrated with how the whole system is working now, because sometimes they don't even tell us that they've given you money. I don't even know now, that they've given. No, they're not even copying us on the emails that would, the Rojics are funded, XYZ. So we're working on that too. We're like, you just have to let us know too, so that we're aware of what money is going out to people for accountability's sake, So, yeah. Like I said, I probably already said too much. Maybe I'll get fired. I can go back to the field.
Okay, so there's this 300-hour course for leadership.
Not
Is
moving away
there
from
gonna be anything like, kind of like what we're doing with Mad Joy, right, for everybody? Is there gonna be any kind of an online training for everybody to get started, or this is just for leadership second term career?
This is for anybody going into their second term. It's going to be made available for them to start. And it is voluntary. But, and then, you know, without like saying this, I'm going to say it, I guess. You know, at some point when you're going to be considered for FC of Melanesia, they're going to look to see, did Alicia do AGWM lead? And if you said, I'm not participating in lead, you know, obviously, even an FC goes all the way up to the EC because we're, you know, doing some small minutes with that. That's going to be the question, did they do lead or not? So lead will be a prerequisite for moving up in leadership. At the same time, and this is very important that you hear me on this, just because you completed lead doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be an FC or an AD. Somebody say hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Okay, good. So that's like the danger, I think, is, wait a minute, I completed all these courses, now I want to be, I don't think we have that culture in AP, but there are certain regions that's going on there too. So we're having to make sure that we say, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to move in leadership. And let me just tell you my own leadership journey. You know, when I was, probably only like 5, 6, maybe 7 years into my missionary career, I was frustrated with myself. I was like, why do things always end this way? Like, something has to change. And then this really was a benefit. I talked in the Mad Joy retreat that there was a point where I had to work in the human resources department of this company. One of the things I did was I helped them with their vision, mission, values. And the other was they wanted me to do a monthly training for their up-and-coming leaders in the company. So I started like getting into leadership books and all this stuff, and the ones that changed my life were John Maxwell. And I remember it was like, oh, he's so basic. Yeah, well, I didn't have the basics. No, I was like operating with like nothing. And Liz will tell you, I was part of the Mad Joy Club, or not Mad Joy, the Joy Life Club.
You're welcome to Mad Joy.
And the Joy Life Club was this, John Maxwell would make a cassette, and you'd get a paper with blanks. And I'd go to the post office and pay a little customs fee. And every month I looked forward to getting that tape, and it was a leadership lesson. So it was his books, his leadership lessons. And I felt like, I wasn't like, someday I'm going to be RD of AP, I better get my leadership down here. No, I just wanted to be a better leader. I was already leading people. I want you to look at your neighbor and say you're a leader. Hey, you're a leader. We are all leading people. I wasn't thinking about leading my colleagues at the time. I was only thinking about all these Indonesians that I was working with, and I needed to be a better leader for them. And my character needed to be improved, and my leadership skills needed to be improved. There was so many things I was falling short on, but I made a decision I was going to be a better leader. So I want you to join AGWM Lead, because I want all of you to be, we're going to have the best leaders in all of AGWM. But Alicia, you will get like once, and then I don't think it's going to be up until April. They keep delaying it, but April is like the time. You'll get like an email. We'll talk. The ADs will figure out how this is going to go down, and we're going to use an LMS. More acronyms here. A learning management system. How do you write that down? LMS. Learning management system. And you'll have an account on this LMS, and you'll be able to go on. And it'll track you as you're doing this. Is that going to be your question?
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's a cost to it, and then also if it's like a work at your own pace, or if it's like, like
no and yes. No cost. And it will be a work at your own pace kind of a thing. Okay?
And yeah. Right. Yeah. So it will be a work at your own pace. For PO, this is replacing, if you remember, the Emerging Leaders Forum. Okay, so one of the reasons this died is because AGWM was coming out with a different system and it didn't overlap. So if you're part of the Emerging Leaders Forum, then it'll be at your own pace, only we will have a cohort that is going through it, and we'll say, okay, we're gonna do this month, we're gonna do this month. But it won't be an overwhelming pace because I do want you to primarily focus on your ministry. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, and I appreciate, like, Brian and Renee have been very intentional about how they want to develop leaders here, how they want to, and so I know for him it was like, so wait a minute, I got this other thing going on, and so I appreciate the fact that he's like willing to say, no, for the good of the greater organization, I'm going to morph what I'm doing in PO into HWM lead, and I think everybody needs to kind of do that, so, good. Anybody else? Christine, did you ever have any?
No, she asked the question.
Oh, okay, good. So glad we got off of BGMC. I don't want to bring that up.
Now we're thinking about it.
It's such a pain point for me. I can tell you that right now. It's a huge pain point for me. Go ahead.
I have a little
Bill?
question. What is the general feeling around headquarters? I mean, like I was a seminary student back in the late 80s, 90s.
Me too.
And
That's where I went to school.
okay, very good. And I mean, it was like a beat hub of activity. You go down to the cafeteria, smile, and
Everybody's got a suit and tie on. And
yeah. But now I go in there, and the place almost seems dead. And but is there a general optimistic feeling around headquarters?
You know, now that I've been there so long, I guess I lose track of my feelings for it all. But I will say this.
This is recorded.
The general council sold the property where the warehouse, the old church was. There was this, there was, where Campbell is, and it goes north. It's a one-way street. Everything on the west side of Campbell has been sold, and they're going the city's going to build a middle school there. With the money they got from the sale of that property, they are doing a massive renovation of 1445 Boonville. So it's going to have a whole other look, a whole other feel. I've seen the mock-ups. And by the way, Rick Ross, who's the new treasurer, is the right man to be in that place for right now. He's got it going on, and I think it's going to be well done. Matter of fact, I'm probably going to be out of my office for maybe as long as a year. Well, they're going to revamp the whole AGWM is going to be revamped. And so the general overall feeling, I think, is we have obviously a lot less employees that we, because keep in mind, we don't operate the press anymore. I don't think that GPH sells like what they used to sell. So you don't see those activities are gone. And even AGWM is still down a number of employees. So you don't see quite as much activity as you used to see.
So we got a newsletter from our missions coordinator from district, and one of the 2 points he mentioned is clarifying the tithe. Can you tell us, because I know this has come up in some other communications, can you tell us how our tithe works being an HEWM missionary?
The general council bylaws, which supersede any district, are that missionaries pay $25 a month to their district, and that's it. And anything else that they wrote you in that newsletter is not gospel. And you can tell them I said that. Please put it on recording. And if they would like to change it, then they should bring it to the general council floor.
$25, not 25%.
$25.
Yes.
And if you need to quote from the general council bylaws, you may do so at any time, and you can find that stuff anywhere. I don't know what they do with MAs, but I do know that half of our tithe goes to HEWM. Some of us pay tithes to the general councils in the countries where we serve. Like, not a tithe, but an amount of money, which I did for years in Indonesia. So at the end, there's not much left over. So I think you just gotta hold the line on that and say, thank you for this, but it's not according to the Constitution and bylaws of the General Council. I can't abide by it. And if you would like to change that, bring it to the floor. He ain't bringing it to the floor. There's no way. Whoever gets up and brings that to the floor is going to get hammered, because it's like, you're hitting the missionaries? What, are you kidding me? So that's the truth. I mean, that's the gospel right there on the tithe. It's $25 a month per credential holder. Well, and if you're not a credential holder, then you don't have to pay them. You don't have to give anything to the district. And I think that goes, now they may say that doesn't apply to MAs, but I would argue with that and say, but MAs pay half of their tithe already to HEWM, and you need to point that out to them in your newsletter and say, so what do we got left over here? He wants 25%, is that what he said?
And he already mentioned 50% goes automatically.
Yeah, but tell them the bylaws of the general council. This is where these guys, they kind of forget that there's...
Maybe forward this email to Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let it be a regional director level discussion.
I'm happy to write to him and let him know. Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
Good.
And maybe I misread it too, I mean, because.
I'll get my buddy Frank Cargill involved.
Going off of that too, we have income sources like maybe rent that we're receiving. Those things are kind of still under the district, so to speak, if you're a credential holder, is that correct? So half to the, at least for our district itself, goes half to the district, half to the church per tithe there.
The general council bylaws state that a missionary pays $25 a month to their district.
Okay.
There's no other provision in there for, well, you've got passive income or you've got one thing or another. Now, I personally give more than $25 a month. So I like my district, I like what they're doing. I give to their Thrive Fund, and I give more than $25 a month. Matter of fact, I just filled out my renewal, and I made sure I put in my note that the amount I've paid is far more than what I'm obligated to pay. And they're appreciative of it.
On the field?
No.
Is that the same all times?
Same all times.
Because we were definitely told something different. We were told $25 when you're on the field, and then when you're off the field, it's up to the district.
Well, they're making that up.
Discouragingly say $25, but.
Yeah. Well, tell them, can you show me where that is in the Constitution and bylaws of the General Council? So, no, it's just not there. And these guys are also kind of going along blind because districts are underfunded. We should turn the recording off. Districts are underfunded, and can you just turn it off for a minute? The recording?